In this video, we are going to learn about group by. Suppose you are given a situation where you have a table that has column 1 with the student's name and column 2 with their marks. Here on your screen, we have student A, B, and C, and along with that, we have their marks. Now, you have been asked to give the total marks of each student. How are you going to do it? The way we can do it is we can actually make a group of each student. For instance, in the table we can see that student A have got 2 marks, 70 and 60. It could be of different subjects. So what we could do it, we could take these two values and group it into one. Similarly, we can group the students B together, and we could group all the marks by student C in one group. Now that we have made the group, we can now perform a function and we can get total marks for student A, total marks for student B, and similarly total marks for student C. Now, if you have understood that very simple example, you can now understand group by very easily, which is used to organize data into group now, which is based on one column or more column, just the way exactly we did in the example. And as you saw in the previous example that we took the marks and then we performed a function which was a sum function, right? We added those marks. Similarly, in group by, whenever you use group by, there are good chances that you'll also use aggregate function. Now, it is not mandatory that you are going to use aggregate function along with group by, but in most of the cases, you will find that group by clause comes with an aggregate function. And finally, one thing to note that group by clause comes after where clause, whereas it is always before order by. So order by will always come in the last. Let us look at the syntax. So syntax is like select column, a particular column, then an aggregate function on another column from table name and then group by. Now, one thing to note here that the column name in which we are performing group by is not the same column in which we are performing the aggregate function. It does not have to be the same. So now let us go to our PG admin and do some hands-on and make things more clear. Okay, so to learn group by, let us use the column that is payments column. So we're gonna write select star from payment. Let us run it and see what do we have. In this table we have payment ID, customer ID, staff ID, rental ID, and an amount. Now, one thing to note before we go ahead and we start learning about group by in practical, we need to remember that we can apply group by on a categorical data. Now, what is a categorical data? It's a data that can be categorized. Very simple. Let us look here. See, in the staff ID we have 2 and 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. It means this data is categorized. Okay, in the same way, if you look at the customer ID, we have 341, 342, 343. It means it is a categorical data, similarly to what we had in the example. So let us suppose we are being asked that find a customer who is spending the most. Now here we have customer ID and we also have amount. Okay, so what are we gonna do? So we have been asked to find the customer who is spending the most. So it means we have to group by customer. So we'll write group by customer ID. Okay, so we are grouping by our data by customer ID, and then what do we need? We need the total spending. Now, so to have the total spending, what we are going to do, we are going to come to the select column and we are going to use an aggregate function and we are going to say sum amount. Very similarly to what we did in an example, if you try to correlate with the example that we saw in our slides, we had students. We categorized our student A, B, C into their own groups. That is what we are doing here with group by customer ID. And then we used a plus function, addition function to add their marks. And that is what we are doing here. We are using this sum function on amounts to get the total spending that is done by a particular customer ID. Now we may also need the customer ID to view it. This is not mandatory, but of course you would like to see. So here we see as an output with customer ID 184 and their sum. What does this mean? Is that customer ID with 184 has spent $80, customer ID 87 has spent 137, and so on. Now what we are being asked, we are being asked to find a customer who's spending the most. So what we can do is we can use order by, and we can say that we want to order by the total number of spending. Now you cannot use the column amount here directly because the column does not have the total that is being spent by the customer, but here some amount does have it, so we are going to say order by some amount. Now since by default it is in ascending, so it's 27, 32, 37, what we can do is we can come again up here and say DESC, which means descending. And here we see that the customer ID 148 is the one that has spent maximum with $211, and customer ID 5 to 6 has spent 28, and then it goes down. Now just the way we have found the total number of total amount that is being spent by a customer, what we can also find is the total transaction that is done by a customer. So instead of count, instead of sum, we can use the other aggregate function, that is count, and then over here too we can say count, and then if we run it, we see that the customer ID 148 has done the maximum number of transactions, that is 45. Then customer ID 526 has done 40 transaction, and customer ID for 144 has done 40 transactions. So these are the customer ID with top transaction. Similarly, what we could also do is we could group by our query not just with one column. Here we are using only one column, but we could also group it by two columns. So we have staff ID. So let's try to group by it with staff ID, and also in the select statement, let us write staff ID because we would like to see it. So here we can see we have customer ID 1 and 2, and along with that we have staff ID. So here we say that customer ID 1 has spent $53 with staff ID 2, and customer ID 1 has spent $16 with staff ID 1. Now now again, with you can maybe order it by staff ID, so maybe you get it in more uh, good way. It is first by all, you'll get the result that's been spent with customer ID 1, and then eventually when you go down you'll get the result with the customer ID 2. That is one way to do it, but I think this works better. Or maybe you could also do is you could maybe change the position of the select query, like customer ID and staff ID. You can maybe swap it, and then the result may look better. Yeah, because 2121 will look better. So that is one way to perform your group by. Now things will get more powerful and complex once you do it with joining statement, and that is what we are going to learn in next upcoming videos. So I'll see you there.